Okay, I just sent the text to start the live stream.
I think it has begun.
Caleb, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Stanley Tucker.
Caleb, this is Les Hall. Can you hear me as well?
Hey, folks.
Yeah, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Senator, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you, Delegate?
Hanging in there? Hanging in there. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Looks like
Have we gotten started with the meeting?
We're live now.
Okay, fantastic.
Great.
Well, do you want to start with a welcome, Delegate Young?
Sure, and I'll throw it to you. That works? Welcome everybody for coming. I know this isn't the best of circumstances, but I think at this point we're all pros at virtual meetings. Looking forward to having a discussion with the participants today. Robust conversation between me and the senator and the other members. So welcome. I will pass it to the senator and we'll get started as soon as we're ready.
Thank you, Delegate Young, Co-Chair Young. I'm State Senator Malcolm Augustine. I am the co-chair on the Senate side of the Joint Committee on Management of Public Funds. Today, we're going to talk about we're going to hear from the different agencies who work with public funds. And I think it's an extremely critical day, given all that we're going through, which Delegate Young mentioned, with the pandemic. And, things are just going to be very different. And our economy has changed. We're going to have a tremendous amount of need to restructure our economy, to be able to deal with what this looks like in the future. A number of those service jobs that people have depended on probably aren't going to come back. And we really need the groups who we're going to hear from today to really be catalysts, I believe, to be catalysts of this future economy that we're having. And so I'm really excited to be hearing from those different groups today. We are obviously on Zoom. We'll be able to get any questions from our colleagues who are on the committee after we have heard each of the different presentations. And it is my understanding that we're going to start with a presentation from Secretary Schultz, who's going to update us on the activities of the Department of Commerce.
Great. Thank you very much, Senator. To you, Chairman Augustine, and also to you, Chairman Young. It's wonderful to be here today. And I wanted to thank your acknowledgement of my kind of inviting myself. I know that members of my team had been invited to come and give a presentation, but I felt it important that if there was an opportunity for me to come and address you on some of the broader issues having to deal with these types of programs, then I would want to also be able to address those with you as well. So very much appreciate your acknowledgement of that. If I do have to run, I do have a meeting with the governor in a little while, but if I do have to run, I do have my Commerce Finance Director, Andy Fish, he is on the call, and then also our Small Business Program Manager, Les Hall, and they are really the subject matter experts, as you know, so they will do a fine job. So I think that there is a slide presentation, if that was going to be presented.
Yes, I can start the slides and then I can just move to the next slide whenever you're ready.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much.
Presentation.
It is nice though, seeing some of the faces I haven't seen in a while. Senator Benson, Senator Beidel, Senator Riley. Okay, thank you. This looks lovely. So we can move on to possibly the third slide. So the next one, perfect. So I wanted to start out real quick with just an oversight for those that may not sit on committees and having to look at the Department of Commerce's programs as often as we would think that you would have, but just wanted to give you an overall idea of the Economic Development Agency, as we call the Department of Commerce. We work closely with our partner organizations to attract new business to the state, to keep our existing businesses in Maryland, and to help businesses expand and create new jobs. We do this in a number of ways, of course, and they include providing tax credit and direct financial assistance. Our industry experts and regional representatives can consult with businesses to help them solve problems and make connections. That's called good customer service. We help provide workforce training. We offer export assistance for businesses looking to enter overseas markets in our global international unit. And also our international team works to attract foreign investment in the state and promotes Maryland to numerous international trade shows. We also, one of the more fun parts of the job, as if it wasn't fun enough, we support all of Maryland tourism, film and arts, and which is a very important economic driver, along with our marketing campaigns as in the Open for Maryland ad campaign. We can move to the next slide, please. So how do we do this? What are the tools that we use? We have a number of targeted tax credits and financial assistance programs that offer assistance to different sorts of businesses across the state. We have a tax credit for manufacturers who create new jobs, for example. You all know that as the More Jobs for Marylanders. We have financing for small minority and women-owned businesses. We have a loan program to support small businesses owned by military personnel and veterans, the wide variety of products that we have to choose from. We also have incentives for major economic development projects, such as large distribution centers or corporate headquarters. Mr. Fish will be speaking in more detail about one of these incentives today, and that's what we know as MDF. Mr. Hall will discuss one of our key small business programs, which we call MSBDFA. I do want to note that these are two very different programs. You've asked us specifically to work and to identify areas in MDF and MSBDFA, but it's also very important to start the conversation just knowing that they are very different and they have very different goals. MDF, for example, is a broad-based job creation program that focuses on large economic development opportunities. MSBDFA, on the other hand, supports the viability and expansion of small businesses owned by economically and socially disadvantaged entrepreneurs. So they are designed to meet different needs within our business community. No program will meet the needs of every business in the state. If we want a thriving, diverse economy, we need to work with businesses of all sizes and in numerous industry sectors at different stages of their growth and expansion. But my team will address the further acts of these programs as we move on. Before I turn things over to my colleagues, I do want to discuss Commerce's COVID-19 relief efforts. Many of you have been involved. Oh, thank you for advancing that slide. I think I forgot to tell you to do that. I appreciate that. Many of you had heard some updates from the department previously, but just very briefly, our $75 million loan program has approved loans of up to $50,000 to more than 1,600 businesses. We are at about the completion state for that. Our grant program has received 2 rounds of funding, one for $50 million and the other for $45 million. And we've been able to approve grants of up to $10,000 to more than 9,600 small businesses. We launched a grant program for manufacturers to begin producing PPE, such as face masks, face shields, and gowns, as well as ventilator components. That was provided $3.8 million to 53 businesses. And that went above and beyond because that helped to support our manufacturing community, as some may not have been able to work in their normal capacity, and it brought them to a level where they have exceeded years' revenues from the past. Governor Hogan also put $5 million of the CARES Act funding towards the MSBDFA program that Mr. Hall is going to be speaking about shortly. And this was to help economically disadvantaged businesses who have been impacted by COVID. Those funds are fully committed to 65 applicants. We also received funding from the U.S. Economic Development Administration to recapitalize our existing Maryland Economic Adjustment Fund, commonly known as MEAF, into a $700,000 revolving loan fund for small businesses impacted by COVID. And I think we here at the Department of Commerce feel very good about that, considering that is not a program that has had a very good visibility in the past, but now it has a rejuvenation of sorts moving forward. Next slide, please. We've also been working with our business community to make sure that they have guidance and support for safe reopening and operating. We convened 13 industry groups to consult with us on the unique challenges different industries might face in reopening to share best practices. This informed the guidance we posted on our Back to Business website, which offers industry-specific information about how businesses can keep their employees and customers safe at work during the pandemic. Commerce worked with our tourism partners on #MasksOnMaryland series of radio public service announcements, encouraging mask wearing, hand washing, safe distancing guidelines, and other CDC guidelines. Also during this time, the regular business of economic development has continued. Just last week, I attended a groundbreaking of a major new logistics center in Hagerstown. Companies like Rata Technologies, GeneDx, and Vision Technologies have announced expansion. The grocery chain Lidl is opening up new stores. Commerce's business development reps worked with hundreds of businesses in their respective counties during the early days of COVID-19 to help them with everything from understanding unemployment insurance to guiding them through the application process for the state's emergency relief programs, as well as various federal funding programs, such as EIDL, PPP, and all the others through the SBA, and connecting them with other resources or opportunities to help the businesses stay afloat. I just want to talk about a couple of those nice moments that were able to be shared from our businesses. Our business development rep at Howard County worked with a company called Soft Serve Distributors, a woman-owned distributor of specialty frozen foods. The company has grown from just selling ice cream to now stocking and featuring more than 3,000 dessert and bread items. Most of the customer base is the hospitality industry. And with that industry hard hit, the business was facing a financial crisis. Our business development rep helped the owner with the application for state funding and also helped them make some international connections through our international team to help them start a kosher meats business as well. Another example is Interlocks, a local company that provides conveyor belt supplies and services and has a number of high-level customers like Amazon, the U.S. Postal Service, and FedEx. They had concerns about being essential when most businesses were closed. So our business development rep helped to clarify their status so they could indeed remain open. Our business development rep on the Eastern Shore helped Afterglow Tanning Salon with filing an application for state funds and several federal programs after her business was forced to close during the height of the pandemic. The business owner also needed help with her landlord trying to collect lease payments, helping her employees file for unemployment, and also caring for her husband, who'd had a heart attack. And our rep helped make the connections needed for the business to survive and reopen when it was safe. Numerous Maryland life sciences companies are hard at work developing vaccines, diagnostics, and treatments for COVID-19. All told, businesses have received more than $6.4 billion in Maryland of federal relief efforts. When a pandemic hit, Commerce shifted its focus towards sustaining Maryland businesses through this crisis, but we haven't just been playing defense. We've begun to strike back. Looking forward, we know that many businesses and industries are still facing a difficult road ahead and likely will until there is a vaccine. Commerce will continue to be here and to be able to help to support all of those businesses, regardless of industry, regardless of size, regardless of demographics or geographics. And with that, I will turn it over to my very capable team. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Secretary Schultz. This is Andy Fish. I'm the Senior Director of the Finance and Tax Incentives Programs Commerce. And good afternoon, Delegate and Senator and members of the committee. I start here on page 7, just so we're level set here. And since MEDAF was first created in 1999, is a revolving loan fund to provide below market fixed rate financing to growth industries, look to expand in priority funding areas. It was later consolidated in the year 2000, and it's evolved to 5 major shared capabilities in today's evolution. Those capabilities here on the screen here, and the one that you see utilized most often in recent years has been the focus on assisting businesses and their projects that have significant new job creation and substantial private capital investment. That private capital investment constitutes the largest funding source for a project. The state assistance is just a small component of the total project funding. And also with that capability, the host county is required to provide a 10% local match of the state funds. So you have alignment of the local jurisdictions and also the state working on that project. Other capabilities has enabled the fund to provide assistance to local jurisdictions. Examples there would include the Ridgely Tech and Industrial Park, Barton Business Park, BWI Tech Park, and also the Hagerstown Logistics Center that was mentioned earlier. And then I'll mention lastly, the special purpose component enabled assistance to the Maryland Theater, whose project is a critical component of the downtown enhancements in the city of Hagerstown. And that project is funded by state, county, and city resources, as well as the private sector. So those are the major capabilities there. And as we evolve now on page 8, we'll see a summary snapshot of the MEDAF deals that have settled since 2015. These are largely new job creation deals with the counties, reflecting the emphasis and evolution of MEDAF over that time. And here you see $67.3 million of MEDAF funds invested in 116 projects, and they all entailed $2.47 billion of private capital investment. What that means is for every dollar of MEDAF going into a project, there was $37 of private funds that went into it. And those funds are utilized for things like the land and building construction, equipment purchases, and other components that go into outfitting these large major industrial projects here. The projects range very much in size. Over this time, the average assistance per project was about $580,000. And the range of this was large as well, ranging from as small as $150,000 per project to as much as $2 million, which is the maximum that could be done under MEDAF. Per job, it's approximately $2,068 measured that way. So we look at MEDAF a lot of different ways when we look at the possibility of utilizing this important program with the local projects. Drilling down a little bit as we next turn to page 9, we'll see here a distribution by county. And this largely aligns with the population densities as you might expect across the state, but more particularly, it aligns with the local strengths that are there, such as transportation infrastructure, being highway, rail, port facilities, and also air. Trade Point Atlantic is a major asset, the Port of Baltimore, Bainbridge up in Cecil County, and also federal facilities such as the NIH, as well as university research places, along with workforce talent and availability, all factors that drive the distribution where projects takes place. As Secretary Schultz mentioned earlier, the Commerce, Business, and Finance specialists work closely with the county economic development offices on opportunities across the entire state to ensure support that's consistent with the local and state objectives. Moving over to page 10, Commerce actively promotes the engagement among small business and minority vendors on MEDAF projects. Several years ago, the department began efforts to collect demographic information on the recipients of MEDAF and the related business awards to those minority businesses participating in the project. Due to legalities, this information cannot be required. However, voluntary disclosures from 28 recipients have resulted in the pie chart and the statistics that you see here. Unfortunately, most of the forms that were returned were blank. This data and its increasing participation is very important to the department And our efforts will continue to make the outreach and obtain the demographics so we can continue to promote the kind of participation in the projects that we'd like to see. Moving over then to page 11. Thank you. Slide 11 largely shows a longer term view that follows the 5-year trends that I mentioned on a prior slide. We have 2 examples we'll get into, but again, you'll see here the private capital investment over the time since 2000 when the consolidation took place. There's $4.6 billion of private capital investment into these projects, creating over 24,000 new jobs and retaining 36,000. And overall, one of the measures we look at when we're evaluating a project and the effectiveness is the return on incentive. And you'll see at the bottom of this, the return on incentive in MPF is approximately 36-1, which is a very, very strong number, reflecting both the direct tax revenues created by the projects as well as the indirect benefits that come out of them. The examples that I'll conclude with on page 12 before handing things over to Mr. Hall include a project that took place in Anne Arundel County, Harmons, Maryland, to be specifically. This is the Catalent Biolistics headquarters and manufacturing building you'll see on the right here. This was a business that was actively considering Cambridge, Massachusetts for their project. While the early work by Catalent was done in Baltimore City in the Biopark Center, when they were looking to expand a facility and get something larger, they were very strongly looking at Cambridge, Massachusetts, largely reflecting the influence of their major investors. At the end of the day, they chose on the Harmons facility in Anne Arundel County, and the result here was a 900 job, 345,000 square feet of space for a advanced biomanufacturing project that we're really proud of here. It's in Anne Arundel County, and Catalent was very appreciative of both department support and the opportunity to do that in conjunction with the county as well. The other example on the left side of the page is in Lanham, Maryland, Prince George's County. This was a headquarters project for a business called 2U, which is a educational development technology business. This project involved growing and retaining 1,300 jobs in 200,000 square feet of office space. $15 million of private capital investment went into this. And the MPF assistant was in the form of a conditional loan to assist with the retention and growth of that in Lanham. And given the nature of education technology, that project could have taken place anywhere in the country. And we're fortunate to have that take place in Prince George's County, Lanham, Maryland. In addition to the workforce, during and after completion, the projects in MPF in turn are part of the local ecosystems for opportunities that follow that would include supplier opportunities and small businesses, including retail, housing, and education. So that's our snapshot presentation of MPF here for you today. And next we'll turn things to my great colleague, Les Hall.
Okay, thank you, Andy, and good afternoon, members of the committee. The Maryland Small Business Development Financing Authority program was created originally in 1978, as Secretary Schultz mentioned, to provide financing for the viability, startup, and expansion of small businesses owned principally by socially and economically disadvantaged persons. Several years later, in 2001, the program's client base was expanded to include practically all small businesses that were not able to meet the credit criteria of financial institutions and therefore were not able to move their projects forward. It's important to understand that MSBDFA is a need-based resource, which provides a source of access to capital. MSBDFA is not principally a job creation resource. As a result, sometimes you'll find that the cost per job for a MSBDFA project is typically a little higher than incentive-based resources, which may require defined job creation or retention. The MSBDFA program principally includes 4 components: a guarantee fund, a contract financing fund, a surety bond fund, and what we call an equity participation investment fund. Each has statutory capability to provide up to $2 to $2.5 million in financing. However, we find that most of our projects are much smaller than that and are in the 100,000 to 700,000 range. These resources provide a source of working capital, term loans for equipment, for example, loan and surety bond guarantees for the benefit of private financial institutions and private surety bond companies, and direct surety bonds, and in some instances, direct equity investments. A couple of recent recipients of resources from the program, which I think are typical of other companies in the portfolio, are Williams Consulting, LLC, which is a healthcare consulting and healthcare information technology services firm. It is headquartered in the Catonsville area of Baltimore County. It is both minority and woman-owned. It is both a certified Maryland minority business enterprise and a U.S. Small Business Administration 8A certified business enterprise. The company has grown from its startup to approximately 20 employees today. MSBDFA provides a line of credit of $500,000 to support the working capital needs of the company so that they're able to perform on government contracts, both federal and state government contracts. The second firm that you see there, Physical and Sports Rehab Incorporated, is a physical and sports rehabilitation therapy practitioner. Here again, the company is minority owned. It is a Maryland certified minority business enterprise located in the Largo area of Prince George's County. The company has grown to 15 employees. In this instance, the MSBDFA program provides a guarantee to a private commercial bank, City First Bank in this instance, to facilitate 2 term loans from the bank to the company for purposes of both working capital and equipment. Okay, we can move to the next slide. All right, thank you very much. Okay, so Commerce provides administrative oversight for the program. Commerce provides capital to facilitate financing of the eligible small businesses. The program has an independent authority appointed by the governor, which approves or declines financing applications. The department works very closely with a private contractor and small business partner, Meridian Management Group, who manages on a daily and monthly basis the 4 MSBDFA components. Next slide, please. Okay, from fiscal year 15 through fiscal year 20, the program settled 141 financing transactions for a little over $41 million in direct loans and about $5.8 million in loan guarantees. This means that 141 transactions were actually consummated. That is, clients receive the funding to move forward their projects. It was probably twice this number of transactions that were approved, and that during the course of each fiscal year were in process of settlement. These financing transactions created or retained approximately 2,238 jobs. Next slide, please. Okay. MSBDFA is a statewide resource. And you'll find that over time, small businesses in all counties of the state and Baltimore City have taken advantage of the resource. From 2015 through 2020, however, Prince George's County, Baltimore City, Harford County, and Baltimore County had the greatest level of activity. And as you might imagine, this changes from year to year as we endeavor to penetrate all counties in the state of Maryland. Next slide, please. Similarly, MSBDFA services a very diverse racial, ethnic, and gender population in the state. As you can see here, from fiscal year 15, once again, through fiscal year 20, African Americans accounted for about 58% of activity, and females accounted for about 48% of activity. And this, of course, is based upon demographic information that we requested from the recipients. Of course, we cannot legally require it. Some recipients elect to voluntarily submit, and these percentages, of course, are on the basis of that submitted information. Next slide, please. Okay, some of the outcomes that we saw over the period FY15 through FY19. On average, approximately 85 businesses were in the program at the end of each fiscal year. Of these, about 96% performed as expected, that is, succeeded during the year in meeting their corporate objectives. On an annual basis, approximately 13% of clients in the portfolio graduated from the program. And by graduation, we mean that they have evolved to the point where they are able to qualify for private financing assistance and therefore no longer need state resources. So, you know, we work very hard to get them to that status. And finally, approximately 3.5, approximately 3% of companies on average defaulted and ended up in what we call a workout status each year. And to address this particular circumstance, Commerce engaged in a very active collection effort related to delinquent and defaulted loans. Okay, with that, let me introduce once again our contractor and small business partner who works with the program on a daily basis. And he will add some important details for our understanding. Mr. Stanley Tucker, Chief Executive Officer of Meridian Management Group. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Les, for the introduction. And I think,
Mr. Tucker?
Yes.
Yeah, before you get started, I just want to make sure, I know that you are on our agenda and you're going to talk to us. I'm not sure what the timeline for Secretary Schultz is, but I just wanted to make sure, because I know that she has somewhere else to go. I don't know what her timing is and whether or not some colleagues might have some questions that it may be important for her to hear. Secretary Schultz, what's your time?
I have roughly about 12 minutes.
Okay.
So I'm happy. I know Mr. Tucker has probably a fantastic presentation, but I would like to be able to address any questions of your members, should they have any. Okay.
Does that work for you, Mr. Tucker?
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, fantastic. So with that, we will definitely get, we're going to hear back from Mr. Tucker. There's no question about that. But if any colleagues have any questions with regard to the presentation that was just made, if you would, you can use the raise the hand function, or I can also see a hand. Did I just see a hand from Senator Riley? All right, Senator Riley.
Can unmute.
Can we unmute Senator Riley? Senator Riley, can you? Yeah, there you go. You're good.
Okay. Madam Secretary, good to see you.
You as well, sir.
This morning, I had a long conversation with some folks from some of our nursing homes, long-term care, et cetera, facilities. These folks are still under a state mandated testing of their staff and their residents. The information I have is through August 15th. Their testing was covered expense-wise by the state or the federal government or by the county government, some other organization. And since August 15th, they've not been having the testing at a no-cost basis. It's called, bear with me, surveillance testing. We need to test the nursing care workers to see if they have a positive COVID. Is there any discussion of this problem in the Commerce Department, or are you aware, or any of your staff aware of a manner in which these folks can get reimbursed? If you have 100 folks on staff and they have to be tested once a week, average test is $150, $15,000 a week is a lot of money, and there's been no offset in terms of revenue, so they're bearing the brunt of the cost factor on their own. So number one, are you aware of it? Number two, any suggestions on how we can help fund those?
I would say that I'm aware of it peripherally. That industry has not come to me specifically to talk about additional type of funding through the Department of Commerce. I believe traditionally those types of funds have come through other resources, through the CARES Act funds, like through the Department of Health. However, I have made a note, Senator, and I can make sure that I can get back to you with some additional information on that.
Sure, you're going to be seeing a very influential person in a few minutes. He may be interested in this subject.
In just a few minutes, sir. I'll make sure that this topic is presented.
Thank you for your help.
Okay. Co-Chair Young, I see a couple more senators. If some of the delegates have questions, we can definitely.
You're good to go, Senator. I'm keeping an eye on my.
All right.
Too, so.
Very good. Senator Benson, I see that your hand is raised.
Mute. Could you unmute her?
Okay, is that all right?
Yes,
Yeah.
ma'am.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to find out if the copies of the presentations that are being shown today, will they be available for all of us, please?
They are with the committee staff, so they can share them to whomever they would like. It's all public knowledge.
Yeah, I think that's very important. I need to take a closer the presentations, and that way I'll be able to to ask some questions that I have some concerns about. But I need to look
Of course.
at the presentation again. Okay, thank you.
Of course, Senator Benson. Thank you.
Thank
Senator
you.
Benson. Senator Bidle.
Thank you very much, Senator. And to Secretary Schultz, thank you for being with us today. It's always a pleasure to see you, and thank you for your work. My question, I think, though, probably goes right to Lesh Hall. The work that you're doing with Ms. Bitfa, can you tell us your success rate? How do you judge success? How many of your businesses are still active today? You know, some kind of measurement for your success, Mr. Hall. How do you judge that?
Sure. Thank you for the question. As I suggested, we have approximately 85 businesses in the portfolio at the end of each fiscal year. And what that and 13 13% that graduate each year. And what that is indicative of is the large number of businesses that continue to thrive on an annual basis. We're seeing only about 3% or 3 businesses that result in defaulted status on an annual basis. So again, approximately 96% of businesses that enter the portfolio perform exactly as expected and are able to sustain themselves on an annual basis.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. As we're waiting to hear from other folks and whether or not they have questions, I do have a question about the Emergency Relief Loan Fund and whether or not that is, at this point, is it totally subscribed? Is there any potential follow-on that's being discussed as we are continuing to have sort of an ongoing concern with, basically, as you talked about, and similarly, the same thing, is there any follow-on on the grants? And I know that in their current status with regard to subscription.
Yeah, so thank you. That's a great question, Senator. And I will say that as I've told both members of the House and the Senate over the course of the last 7 months, when we received additional funding, we wanted to be able to make sure that that applicants that were in the system were able to be funded should there be additional funding. And that's exactly what we did in July. So when we went through the first $50 million of funds in the grant relief program, we received an additional $45 million, and that went again to the grant program. And we made that decision because we felt that the grants were much more popular and much more in need than businesses needing another loan product. A lot of businesses were able to get loan products from the SBA. So we wanted to make sure that we had that immediate cash influx for those businesses. So all of those funds from both the loan and the grant fund are currently accounted for. I know that we continue to hope that the federal government provides some additional type of funding. I know that the governor would also want to continue, some type of funding as we can look at the revenues that we have. But we're being very methodical as to how we do that. Where we are now is much different than we were on March 23rd when we introduced the program, where we wanted to be very inclusive of all the industries. Now we are very well aware of those industries, those sectors that are suffering more than others.
And, just another just sort of follow up to that, Secretary, and thank you so much for that answer. I'm hearing from some of my businesses that are now they're starting to get some clawback on some of the PPP money and some concerns about that. Is there anything that are you all engaged? I know it was kind of outside of it, but you still are sort of in it. Any way that, are you aware of that? And is there anything that you and Commerce are able to do to help some of our businesses that are that are a part of the federal program, but maybe are experiencing some issues there?
Well, other than, as I had mentioned earlier, we want to be very supportive of being able to connect all the businesses with any of the programs, whether they be a federal program, state program, and many of the individual localities, the counties and municipalities have put out programs as well. I know also wanting to be able to get them the correct information about some of those other types of relief, which is, the rent forbearance, for example, and some of those types of overhead issues that may be able to be helpful with them. I know that there's a battle going on. Well, obviously there's several battles going on down the road in Washington, D.C., one of which being what's going to happen with the next round of funding. One of the questions that Congress has to deal with is there going to be loan forgiveness with those PPPs? And that's not something that the state can answer. We're not prepared to answer that question for those federal loan programs out there right now. But I know that there's also the conversation that's occurring as to whether or not to provide tax relief for those that have incurred some of the benefits from the programs at the federal level. And I believe the governor has in the past supported that type of an effort. I don't know where that effort is right now, but which is one of the reasons why when we had to choose the types of programs that we wanted to get out with the additional funds that we did receive, we wanted to put the grants in the hands of, which are obviously non-repayable grants and funding in the hands of the local businesses.
Okay, I appreciate that. And then just finally, we're a legislative body. Do you have, or do you foresee anything that as far as the recommendations coming out of this body that we should be recommending to the General Assembly about legislative action or budget priorities, just sort of based on where we are and understanding the situation that we're in with regard to the economy and COVID?
Well, I think for all of you, you have been doing as much collecting of lessons learned and best practices as I'm sure we have in our position in the executive branch. We certainly have some ideas of ways to be able to move forward in the future that may be a little bit more efficient than the way that we were able to operate under a very fast acting pandemic and the crisis. So we're still working on, some possible legislative ideas, but as you know, looking at all of the intricate details about how to put those types of statutory changes together, it takes a little bit of time to be able to make sure that we're actually helping the right things and in the right way. So we're being very deliberate about that. I would like to open up our office, though, as always, to anybody on the call that has a question about potential changes that you're looking to make when it comes to economic recovery. I have a phenomenal research team and a legislative team that I'm sure would be helpful to kind of talk through some of the ideas that you think that you might have for the future.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate that. Delegate Young, Chair Young, you have some comments and you want to take over?
Yep, so we don't have questions from the House. Anything follow-up, we'll respond to you. I just want to thank Secretary Schultz and her staff for coming. Mr. Hall, Mr. Fish, thank you for your comments. Appreciate you taking the time today, Madam Secretary.
Great. And Chairman Young and Chairman Augustine, Andy and Les are welcome to stay on the call if there's anything specific that comes up after Mr. Tucker's presentation. And thank you very much for allowing me the opportunity to be with you today. Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here, Secretary. Appreciate it.
And, since Mr. Tucker, you received a bit of an introduction from the Department of Commerce staff, we're going to do a quick jump in the agenda and just let you follow. And I imagine what you're going to say also plays into what they were explaining. So it just makes sense. We're going to let Mr. Tucker speak from Meridian, and then we'll go back to the agenda with TEDCO and our other representatives. Is that good, Senator?
That sounds good.
All right, Mr. Tucker, when you're ready, go for it.
I'm ready to, are you putting my presentation up on the screen? Someone, please.
Looks like it's up there now.
Okay, next page, please. Okay, our mantra over the years and continue to be is that capitalism without capital does not work. According to numerous studies, both the state most recent disparity study, lack of access to capital continues to be a problem in the small minority and women-owned business community, actually throughout the country. MMG, our approach in addressing this problem in cooperation with the Department of Commerce and the Legislative Black Caucus has been, we've developed what we call a unique strategy to provide what we call a continuum of financing product, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. The strategy includes the provision of debt and equity, along with surety bonding to assist in their growth. There are 4 components that are all designed to supplement and complement each other and work together to help the financing needs. We provide, not only we provide capital, but our management team also is heavily involved in developing entrepreneurs. Capital is good, but we've spent quite a bit of time ourselves in helping providing technical assistance as well for our portfolio companies. Some of our accomplishments, we've been nationally recognized, and our team has been recognized for developing Ms. Biffin to a national model. We've been recognized by the Wall Street Journal, the Insight of Center for Community Economic Development, and the Center for Regional Economic Competitiveness. We're considered as the most active non-bank lender to minority businesses in the state, according to a 2017 Johns Hopkins study. And our financing diversity, 77% of our financing were to minority businesses, and 48% of our financings were to women-owned businesses. Next slide, please. These are our 4 components. We provide what we call contract financing that provide loans and loan guarantees to perform in government and public utility contracts. We can provide that financing up to $2 million. We have a guarantee fund where we provide guarantees to loans made to financial institutions, $1 million. The surety bonding component is somewhat unique among states, where we provide bid, performance, and payment bonds directly to commercial sureties, or we can perform provide the surety bonding directly to companies as well. And we can provide these for government agencies and regulated public utility or private entities up to $2.5 million. We have an equity participation investment component where we provide debt and equity financing that includes early stage companies up to $2 million as well. What is unique about us is that, could you go back to that last slide for a minute, please? Is that possible? Okay. What is unique to our strategy, and we say strategies because we feel as though programs are finite, strategies are continuous. We provided our strategy is where we could use these various components and they supplement and complement each other. For example, we could use contract financing in conjunction with surety bonding. We could use our equity components in conjunction with guarantees. And so we, depending on the need of the business, depends on the kind of financing and the structure of the financing that we can put together for these businesses. Next slide, please. These are economic impact, if you will, from 1980 through June 30th, 2020. We did an economic impact analysis, if you will, and we had we put money into 673 small businesses totaling about $218 million. Our economic impact analysis, we usually do, we're in the process of doing another one, but the last one we did took place between 1995 through 2014. And the companies that we provided financing with generated $7.7 billion in sales, $2.3 billion in personal income, averaged about $3,820 a year. I'm fully 20 equivalent jobs a year. It generated about $276.8 million in state sales tax revenue and $66.1 million in local income tax revenues. And the important point here is that this is, with these financings, the gross return on the dollar was actually 10.1, and the net return equates to a return on investment of 9.3 times. So this is a research that was done for us by the Regional Economic Studies Institute of Towson University. Next slide. There's continue to be increased demand for capital. Numerous studies have documented this need, if you will. And in July of 2020, Governor Hogan provided $5 million through the CARES Act, but also in 2019, we received funding. We were unable to meet all our demand, but also to address this work, this shortfall, Secretary Schultz approved a transfer of about $5 million in capital from other commerce programs to meet this need. So we commend Secretary Schultz for really helping us with that need, and also Governor Hogan for approving it for $5 million from the CARES Act. And from this CARES Act, just to show you the need, we received $5 million. We also received over 250 applications requesting $22 million in funding. The $5 million was committed within 2 months to 65 companies. And it's very important to note that the loan repayments from the CARES Act does not come back to MSBDFA, it goes back to the federal government. So the need for additional capital is even more critical, particularly in this COVID-19 environment. Next page, please. Oh, that was it? All right, that was another page. Okay, thank you very much. Be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Mr. Tucker? I don't see any on my end. All right. Senator, any, if you're good.
Yeah, no, I don't see any questions over here, but what I would ask Mr. Tucker is, you said that there was an excess of demand. What do you believe to be the actual market demand that would be out there that would be able to benefit from MSBDFA?
Well, the total demand, we could only estimate, Senator. We haven't, done any total research from that. But if you look at with the $5 million from the CARES that we received, we were able to put that money to work in less than 2 months. We had $5 million, we had $22 million in requests. And so just given that to the senator and delegates, you can imagine, what that looks like across the state. And the money was gone literally in less than 2 months. And so there continues to be a huge demand for capital, and even more so in this COVID-19 environment. We can't I can't give you a specific number across the state, okay, because we have not done that research, but it just given the $5 million that we received for COVID-19 and the requests far exceed the $5 million that we received. So I would say this: if we had $30 million, Senator and delegates, that money would be gone. And we wouldn't be able to physically be able to do it in 2 months. But I would say it wouldn't take a long time. I would say 5 or 6 months, that money would be gone. And I want to commend also the folks at Commerce, and particularly we have a board of directors, what we call the authority that we have to take our deals to, because we don't approve anything in-house. And they really worked overtime because we just met once a month, but really it turned into us really meeting once a week to really get to meet the demand and for us to get those loans approved. So I want to commend our authority as well, who really stepped up to the plate. And also the secretary and the governor who helped us out as well.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Tucker. I'm trying to just make sure to see that my colleagues don't have any questions. Colleagues, if you have a question for Mr. Tucker, please let me know. And I don't see that, so I just will say thank you so much, Mr. Tucker, for coming and talking with us and sharing with us your information. I asked you the question of, the size, which to me says that you're saying that more investment money would be appropriate for MSBDFA. I did ask the other question about, and we can do it offline so we can keep moving, but if there is any legislative action that you feel like that we need to do, please do reach out to us so that we know and we can make some recommendations coming into the next legislative session.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And we do have some ideas that we would like to present to the legislature. Obviously, we'll share it first with the secretary for her take on it. But yes, we do have some ideas.
Okay, fantastic. We'll be on the lookout for that.
Thank you.
So seeing no other questions, we'll next hear from TEDCO and Mr. Troy LaMail Stovall. He's the new executive director of TEDCO. So we're just going to say welcome to him as well. And Executive Director Stovall, would you like to take the floor?
I would, sir. Senator, thank you for that introduction. I appreciate that. Great seeing you again. Delegate Young, look forward to spending some time with you and getting to know you and all you senators and delegates that are on this web call. It's intriguing following commerce and following Mr. Tucker, because I think some of the same themes you're going to hear that I'm going to be talking about. And I'll start with, if I may, to thank actually Secretary Schultz and her team at Commerce. She's obviously on our board at TEDCO. She's helped me individually in my transition, but her unit, the secretary and all the folks there, as well as the folks at TEDCO. We have a great partnership, and I'm going to talk about actually a couple of initiatives that we're doing with Commerce. I think the point of this committee is not just the impact of the management of these funds, but how we're leveraging them across the various institutions that exist here in Maryland. And I'm going to talk about that. But I want to start with something that you spoke about, Senator Augustine, about this, and you and I've talked about this. And this is the difficulty that I know you all will have come January, because you got to balance the budget at the end of the day, and I get that, and I fully appreciate that. But it also, we can't underinvest today, because the underinvestments that are made today will have ripple effects 3 to 4 to 5 years from now. And as we think about the behavioral changes that we're all going through here in this kind of TEDCO environment, my mind always goes back to what happened after 9/11. Because after 9/11, we thought differently about air travel. We thought differently about security, and the definition of normal changed. And so the definition of normal is changing, and technology always supports that, and innovation always comes out of that. And so part of what we're here at TEDCO is about is supporting that innovation, not just at an individual company level, but supporting the end of this notion. We're going to talk about this ecosystem and making sure that all this innovation, that people see Maryland as a place to come and begin those technologies. So if I could get, I think it's Caleb could help me with the slides here, I'd appreciate it. So I want to start with, yes, what is TEDCO? So many of you may not really know about TEDCO. So I want to make sure we're all on the same footing here with TEDCO. So you can go to the next slide. Thank you. This statement that I have here, I really do want to spend a minute on it, because we spend a lot of time talking about what we do at TEDCO. At the end of the day, I've changed one word here in my little time here. It used to say enhance economic development, but I've changed that to enhancing economic empowerment. And that was purposeful, because what we're really doing, we're investing in individuals. We're investing at a very individual, we're investing in that entrepreneur, that individual who has that new idea, that way to take technology to a different level. And we're doing that in a way that not just, as I think as Mr. Tucker talked about, and I'll talk about as well, we're not just investing dollars in these individuals, we're investing efforts and individuals and resources so that we ensure their success. So this is not just about the dollars, this is also to ensure that they are connected and that we're knitting together, and that's a word you're gonna hear me say a lot, how are we knitting together all of these resources that we have in Maryland to ensure the success, not just of these individuals and their firms, but the people that they employ, the communities that they serve, and in Maryland overall. So if you could go to the next slide, I appreciate it. So I think the point of showing you this is that, and I'll show you here in a few seconds, kind of the economic impact that TEDCO has had over the years. But at the point I want to show you is that we do this with a pretty small team. And we do this with a small but really powerful team, actually a very talented team. One of our individuals who works in our stem cell area, Miss Amritha, just was named by the Daily Record as the leading women under 40. And so that's the type of talent that we have at TEDCO. And so I'm very excited to be able to now lead this here today. And we actually do have a new chief administrative officer. And this is a structure. And I want to, if I can publicly, want to thank Dr. Linda Singh, Major General Linda Singh, for her transition with me. She was tremendous in helping me transition. I still spend a lot of time talking to General Singh. And so I'm very appreciative of the efforts and the commitment that she made to TEDCO and she continues to make to the state. Next slide, please. So I am very, many of you will get to know me, and I'm looking forward to you all getting to know me. And I very much believe that, and I've had the chance, my career has been, I'm an engineer by training, computer scientist. I've worked at places like McKinsey and Bell Labs. I just came out of a couple of HBCUs. I've worked at Howard and at UDC and at Jackson State. I've consulted to a number of the HBCU world, a number of major institutions across the globe. And what I'm always enamored when I look at these institutions, I really want to understand how they interact with one another and how they treat one another. And this notion of core values sometimes gets overlooked in many organizations. But this is a very serious thing. And I think presenting here to this joint committee on the management of public funds, I really wanted you all to understand how important these core values are and how much I'm committed to these, to the point that I've asked each of our leadership team to actually write a paper on each of these. And some of you may have seen the one on accountability actually got published in the Baltimore Sun. We've had other ones published across various publications across the state, and we'll have them available on our website. But it's not just about writing a paper. We are really trying to move towards how we use these and how we interact with one another, how we interact with our entrepreneurial community, and how we interact with you to show you, obviously this last one was about stewardship, but how we manage ourselves, how we manage what we do is driven by these core values. How we speak to one another is driven by these core values. And so when someone isn't doing something, they should be able to go to one of their colleagues and say, hey, you didn't come to me in a collaborative way, or you didn't respect me in the way that you should have. And we should be able to use these. And so I show you these at the beginning of this presentation and make you know how important this is for me and what you're going to get out of TEDCO going forward. Going forward, please. And so one of the other things that we're talking a lot about at TEDCO is thinking, and those you may not know, TEDCO has a number of boards and authorities and commissions. We have the TEDCO board that I report to, but we have 3 other commissions, authorities, if you will. And so because of the structure of it, sometimes it doesn't always seem that we are working as a singularity. And so we're spending a lot of time talking about this notion of one TEDCO, the notion so that our financial statements are the same and at the experience. So whenever an entrepreneur comes to any part of TEDCO, they have the ability to get to any other part of TEDCO. So it's not about any competition within TEDCO. And I'm even going to talk about, we're even trying to compete with commerce. We're trying to cooperate with commerce. We've got a really cool tool that I'll talk about that we're using to begin to look at all the resources across the state. We've also created a chairs council. We're going to be meeting in a few weeks where all the chairs of the 4 commissions of the TEDCO board and the 3 other committees and authorities that we have, they will come together on a quarterly basis to make sure that we all, as boards and as people who care about Maryland, making sure that we're thinking about this in a collective way. It's not taking away any of the things that any of them do, but making sure that we're amplifying those individual things like stem cell or MII, but also making sure that there's a commonality of experience for TEDCO and doing all of that through our core values. Next slide, please. So that's who we are. What do we do? And I've kind of intimated all along, so let me go into some details. So what we do, first of all, I want to start with, the next slide, sorry, is impact. And so every 2 years, we try to do an economic impact study. 2020 has kind of thrown us for a loop, but I promise you in 21 we'll have one. And so you see the impact that we've had as of 2018 in terms of the impact to the state, in terms of job creation, venture. And I want to spend a moment on this slide with this venture creation, because that really is what I tried to say at the beginning. It's important to create the jobs. It's important to create that tax revenue. But one of the fundamental goals of TEDCO is also so that others will see Maryland as a place to come and start and grow technology-based enterprises. And so when you look at other parts of the country, like the Silicon Valleys or the Austin, Texas, or the Massachusetts, we want to be in that same type of conversation. We have the assets between our academic institutions, our federal labs, and the individuals that we have in Maryland, and the resources that you all have put into various entities in the state. We have the ability to create that leverage, to create so that every dollar we put in can get multiplied from outside money at a 10 or 12 or 20 multiple. That's the type of metric we are going to start to look at, is how much are we putting in and what does that leverage look like in terms of external capital dollars being placed into our technology ventures here in Maryland. Next slide, please. And we're going to do that by weaving this together. Building these things takes time, and we've got the pieces here in Maryland, but we've got to build them together. And we do that through working with the range of agencies, not only in the state, but also entities like the Maryland Tech Council. And so we've got to be able to weave these things together to produce and create this innovation culture. And that's the word you're going to hear me say a lot about, an innovation culture that we're trying to create, so that people feel compelled to start, have the resources to start, and making it inclusive. And I'll talk more about that, because if all we're doing, as you go back, is to, as Senator Augustine said, is to try to relaunch or restart the economy, we've missed a great opportunity. We have an opportunity here to maybe redesign and rethink this economy so that more people can be inclusive. And I'm going to spend a lot of time at the end of my presentation talking about how do we bring more people into, more communities into this innovative culture that we're trying to create here in Maryland. Next slide, please. So I think many people, when they think of TEDCO, and I probably have said it as well here, they think of just the investment side of TEDCO, and that is one piece. We have a number of investment vehicles that we do. Many of you know them, things like Stem Cell and MII and MVF Maryland Venture Fund. But what we also have, I think Mr. Tucker used the term tech services, tech support. I prefer the term wraparound services. We really do want to surround our entrepreneurs. And by the way, not just our entrepreneurs that we've got investments in, we want to look at any firm, any early stage firm that needs support. We want to support that entire ecosystem to making sure they have the right resources, they have the right access to information, and it doesn't matter about their geography. So we do this for both the rural areas as well as our urban and suburban areas. And we have a number of tools that we use to try to get information from, to make sure we're helping them think about how to develop those business plans, but also how to turn that business plan into an actionable plan, and how to turn that actionable plan into something that, as I said just a few moments ago, takes our $1 of investment and multiplies it out. Next page, please. So I've already mentioned these, the Stem Cell and Innovation Fund. Just if you don't know, the Stem Cell has its own board, and they look at, from our research institutions, opportunities to look at regenerative medicine types of opportunities. And I'll talk about some numbers here in a minute. The Maryland Innovation Fund, or MII, looks at our 5 research institutions, and they look at a number of the tech, they try to de-risk a lot of these research efforts. They act as, I call it, gap funding between the research dollars that many of these schools do a great job of getting, and access to actually traditional institutional funds. The one I want to spend a moment on, this federal tech transfer, we probably aren't as, we haven't scored as many successes in that area as probably any of us would like, but it definitely is a focus area. And I was just talking this morning about how to do that. Actually just got off a phone call about a panel that I'll be on in a couple of weeks around clean energy and renewable energies, and the amount of research that happens in Maryland and the tools that we have in Maryland. And Secretary Schultz will be on that panel as well in a few weeks, how the tools that we have and how other states like Massachusetts have done it for themselves, and what we can do here in Maryland. Given the amount of federal assets that we have here in Maryland, we need to do a better job of leveraging that and taking it further. So we have more to come on that. Next page, please. And so one of the tools that we do use around that is the SBIR, SCTR. For those that are not familiar, this is non-dilutive grant funds that act as, if you will, equity infusions into funds that come out of federal labs. And so we've been able to award these funds over the last several years, and we're very excited. We actually are trying to grow this effort as well. Our federal group that we have has been very aggressive at looking at this. And so I'm really excited. We just announced a grant award that we just recently got here. So more to come on this. This is one of the tools that we're going to be using to bring more of those technologies out of the federal labs here in Maryland. Next page. I've spoken on these, the pre-seed funds, the seed funds, the Maryland venture funds. So these are, again, tools that we have to begin to build economics. And I'll spend a little bit more time on these in a few moments. Next slide. This is the one I really want to get to. So as I mentioned a few moments ago, I believe I've done kind of, and I'm talking to Secretary Schultz in particular and our friends at Commerce, there are a lot of tools, the tools that folks need to start and grow companies exist in Maryland. The challenge is they're scattered across a number of entities, both state agencies and non-state agencies or state-like agencies. And so if you're an entrepreneur, many of you know, because many of you are entrepreneurs, your time can't be spent trying to navigate the bureaucracy of the state of Maryland. And so what we've been able to launch, and we'll launch, I think, next week, is this EcoMap, excuse me. It's a Maryland-based, it's a woman-based company that allows the first phase of this. And I told you I'm a computer scientist, so the version 1 of this, and version 1 of any software isn't perfect, but it gets you out what you got to get. So version 1 of this software is going to allow this data set to get created that'll allow entrepreneurs to understand and get some information based off of what their needs are, and not have them have to navigate all of us. The later versions of this will do the reverse. They'll be able to get information about your firm, know where you are with your firm, and then present to you and say, hey, look here, Joe Entrepreneur, Jane Entrepreneur, here's here are the set of resources the state has available to you. And if you just hit send, we've already pre-qualified you for these things. And so we want to become much more service oriented to them and allow them to know more about what we have, as opposed to having them have to search us out. And this is a great example of us, the TEDCO being us, the Department of Commerce, the University of Maryland partnering, and there are others to begin to gather this information and put this time out. So I'm very excited about getting this launching this, using Maryland technology to make this happen. Next page, please. So this is a great graphic of a lot of the summation of what I've been, gives you an idea of kind of the space and place that TEDCO plays. And it's a very broad space because we do everything from grants to investments. And we do them to the universities, and then as they transition from kind of a research experiment at a university to being a real corporation, how we then provide the funding for them. And so you see the various funds that we have in order to make that happen, and the stage of investment that we have, all the way through a Series A type of funds, and we can do follow-on investments in our Maryland Venture Fund. So this is a great slide that helps you understand kind of where we are in terms of whether it's a tech transfer or an actual investment, and whether it's a university experiment or lab coming out of a university, all the way through a growing corporation here in Maryland. That's that section. So you can close that out. So I want to spend this, let's keep going. This last section really speaks to, frankly, something that I'm passionate about. And that is, we have to, and I've already intimated this, we have to begin to rethink and re-engage this economy. And we believe at TEDCO, we have some of those tools to begin that conversation to ensure that the participation in this technology, this innovation culture, is based off, is representative of Maryland around gender, around race, around ethnicity, and frankly, around geography as well. And so we are internally relooking at some of our metrics that we're going to be reporting to the legislature, metrics we're going to report to ourselves and to our board, to make sure that we are hitting the communities, we're serving the communities. And so for me, the metrics that I'm going to be looking at aren't just about who we're serving, legislators. It's also going to be about who's trying to get in the door And for whatever reason, they're not getting served, because I want to make sure, and I'll just be blunt, I want to make sure that we don't have any institutional biases in what we do and how we do what we do, and that we're serving the broadest set of individuals that represent the broadest set of ethnicities and demographics in Maryland. And I've got to be able to understand that in everything that we do, and hold ourselves accountable. Just like I told you with our core values are about that. Our core values are about stewardship and respect and integrity. And so you're going to get that out of me. Next slide, please. So this gives you an idea of our Builder Fund. Our Builder Fund is a fund that you all have it's legislative you approved from the legislature, created by the legislature, excuse me, and it's for pre-seed tech funds. And I think the key in this with the Builder Fund is it's not just about the money, as Mr. Tucker talked about, but it's about the resources that we provide. We give senior level executives, we partner these individuals with individuals who have experience that can help them grow their business and understand what it means to grow their business. So it's not just about the amount of dollars we invest in, that is important, but it's frankly more about the time that we spend to make sure that they can be successful and the investment that is required to do that. So I want to give you some ideas of if I get to the next page, some really quick, if you go to the next page, Caleb, thank you. So this is our cohort 3. So you see some of the firms we invest in. I just want to give you some idea of what some of these firms do. If I can just get a second. Let's start with Cartech. Yeah, Cartech. They're in Frederick County, and they're a medical device company. They're developing a novel filter needle designed as a single assembly containing both the filter and the needle. So again, in this era of COVID, in this era of looking at different ways to be able to get potentially this vaccine out, that could be a very important thing. Many of you have probably heard of Clear Mass out of Baltimore, producing an FDA-approved transparent medical face mask, which is extremely important, obviously, for those that are hearing impaired. Just moving on, IPGen is in Prince George's County. They're developing a patented software service which predicts whether a claim will be allowed or rejected by the examiner at the patent office. All of these companies have either gotten $50,000 or $100,000 invested in them. Again, I can spend any time, more details on any of them if you want to have any questions, but I wanted to give you a sense of the quality that we have coming into the Builder Fund. For me, this is one that I've asked our team to look at because there's a lot of impact we can have in this. I believe, particularly with COVID, there's more we could do, but we are constrained obviously by the funding and our ability to kind of make that happen. You can go on to the next slide. The other one that we have is our Rural Business Innovation Fund, or RBI. So you see some of the firms we have here. Again, it's $100,000. You see the regions that we have. We have individuals actually in each of those regions that you see at the bottom of the map. I have actually spoken to all of them, and I actually plan on physically visiting them, COVID, with the right COVID restrictions in place. But I want to give you a sense of some of these companies. The one I'm really excited about is Hopflight. They're in Lusby. They're building a aerodynamically advanced electrical vertical takeoff and landing, eVTOL, vehicle that transport urban commuters. And so this could be a cool way to move people around. NanoBioFab is creating a wearable nanomaterial-based technology using state-of-the-art customized inkjet printing nanotechnologies. These nanomaterials and bioproducts are used to detect minute molecules emitted from the skin for real-time tracking of fat consumption and potential disease diagnosis. Again, I can go into details on all of these, but the point being, we've got firms that are not just leading edge and some with it, they're actually looking at things that can help us solve some of the key challenges that we have currently given this COVID situation. Next slide, please. I'm almost done, legislators. And so here's some examples of what we've done right now as we are here at fiscal 20. With our seed fund, we've been, that's just for this year, we've invested in 13 companies, MII in 44, RBII in 104 rural-based companies, and a number of over 1,000 hours. 32 entrepreneurs have been through our pitch events, and we've got 8 Builder Fund investments that have created about 14 jobs. So I think that's about it. Is that one more? I think there's one more. Yeah, impact. I'm sorry, just one more section. I'm almost done. This is very much the similar type of arguments that Mr. Tucker was making, that entrepreneurship really is a driver of economic empowerment, economic development. And so we've got to invest in this. We cannot not invest in entrepreneurship and startups. Keep on going. And so we see what's happening, and we're very clear what's happening. And some of our companies, frankly, have been impacted. We're actually doing an assessment of many of our Maryland, of our TEDCO portfolio, and we understand many of them have been impacted, and we're trying to help them as much as possible. But we also think there's upside here too. This is my next slide. I think it's my last slide, yeah. And so as I've already mentioned, a number of our companies, a number of our investment portfolios have actually played a leading role in our response to COVID. And so we give you some examples here at the bottom. But as I mentioned, we're also looking for those horizon opportunities. The example that I gave, I think I've talked to some folks about, is after 9/11, if we'd all kind of thought about investing in that company that made those 3-ounce bottles that we all have to travel with now, we'd be having a very different portfolio right now, our economic portfolio. And so if you had invested in Zoom even back in January, you'd have a very different stock in your portfolio. The point being, what are those horizon opportunities that we need to be looking at, and can we identify and help Maryland be at the forefront of those? So I believe that is it, legislators. Appreciate you. We still plan on doing our tech expo, all the things being considered. We still plan on having it October, a year from now. So let's all hope that we're able to gather here for the tech expo. Open to any questions.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Lamel Stovall, for those. And I really appreciate the presentation. Colleagues, if you got questions, and I do see you, Delegate Proctor, if you got a question, why don't you jump on in?
Yes, thank you, Senator Augustine. I have a question, Mr. Stovall. You reference your programs with universities, but I'm wondering if you are interacting with our high schools and community colleges, and if so, what kinds of programs are you initiating with them, and how do they know that you offer these programs?
Yeah, Delegate Proctor, thank you for that. And no, let me tell you, I think we do spend a lot of time talking about MII, which is just the 5 research institutions that I'm sure you're aware of. But I don't. Talent is evenly distributed, but opportunity is not. Say it another way, that doesn't, just because we have that one program doesn't mean that we shouldn't be at the other universities. So yes, we do have programs that we do with some of the other universities. I want to do more with the community colleges and the high schools, to your point. I think there's entrepreneurial expertise there. And so we're not as active at that level as I'd like to be, but that is the plan. I'm calling it MII version 2 of how do we touch those high schools? How do we touch the community colleges? And how do we be more aggressive? We actually do have some work that we do with Bowie State and with Salisbury, a little bit with Eastern Shore, but we've got to do more. As I said, we need to do more to make sure that we understand that to create and open up these opportunities, and it's not just about the research institutions. So thank you for that question, but it's something we need to do more of. Let me say it to you that way.
All right,
and we will do more of.
Thank you.
Senator Benson? I see
Yes, thank you. Yes, thank you.
Oh, she went mute on me.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation. To piggyback on what the question Delegate Proctor has asked, what about the historical Black colleges and universities? Have you all gotten involved with, for instance, Bowie State University, Morgan State, the historical Black colleges and universities? This is something that's extremely important, I know, to the African-American community, because if you look at the data, we're far behind when it comes to entrepreneurship.
First of all, Senator Benson, you're my senator. I'm sitting here in my home in Bowie, so thank you for your service in representing me. But you were right. I think I told you. So I have a passion around your exact subject. Actually, Mickey Burnham is a friend. He lives literally 10 houses down from me, and so I literally just got a phone call with him about an idea that I want to get him involved with in terms of to do what you just talked about. Absolutely, I see opportunities just as an example. Through Eastern Shore, looking at what they can do to help us drive. I think there's something around aquaculture and marine culture that we can do there with Eastern Shore. I think with Coppin and Morgan, there are a number of areas where we could find technology solutions to help some of the challenges in Baltimore. And I think we need to be a part of that. I think too many times, like Delegate Proctor was asking, the conversation is about tech transfer. And if you're not into that research side, you don't do tech transfer. You don't have, you're not a Hopkins, just as an example. But entrepreneurship, Senator Benson, can exist anywhere, as both of you alluded to. And so the point being, I'm already in conversations with the folks at Bowie State. As you probably know, they're building the new entrepreneurial center there. I know the young lady that runs the entrepreneurial center there at Bowie State. I know the folks at Morgan and at Coppin and at Eastern Shore. So stay tuned. We will have a very specific program aimed at not just the HBCUs, but the other non-research institutions here in Maryland.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay, colleagues, any other colleagues have any questions for Mr. Stovall?
Senator.
I know that I do. First of all, I feel like we're really in good shape to have TEDCO and this type of investment that happens in Maryland. Do you know the investment that Massachusetts has made in this space? I think that they've had a tremendous return, obviously, on their investment, and how that relates to our investment in this innovation space.
I don't have the exact number. We can definitely get that. They talked about that. Actually, the gentleman who runs the TEDCO-like entity from Massachusetts was on this call earlier, to prepare for this panel discussion about clean energy. But his group is just focused on clean energy, renewable energy for Massachusetts. And he's got a pretty big fund. He's going to give me those numbers. But I do know, because I spent some time in Boston, that the Massachusetts invested a significant amount of dollars to build out their technology, their biotech infrastructure that they have there. And so I can get you those numbers to answer your questions. I don't have it explicitly, but it is going to take an investment, as you and I have discussed. I think learning what the other states have done, what did Massachusetts do, what did California do, what did Texas do? I think there's learnings to be done, and I welcome that. Actually, I think I talked to you about, we as TEDCO, we're either thinking about developing a white paper for you all, for the legislatures, and or trying to arrange, COVID being what it is, visits where you can see not where they are, because I think too many times we focus on where a state is, but where they came from, to learn how they built that. And I think that's the more important thing to kind of understand as we're building our technology innovation culture here in Maryland.
Thank you so much. I really do look forward to working with you on this and continue to build out the program. Chair Young?
Thank you, Senator. I want to also echo your comments related to TEDCO. One, it's a unique opportunity that we have with you in the state. Your results speak for themselves, yours and the organization, since it's been created. So I just want to make sure I thank you for that and acknowledge it. But at the same time, I don't like to be prescriptive when it comes to presentations, because you gave a very good rundown of what it is you do, the impact that I think all the legislators have seen with interacting with you and your predecessors. A personal preference, I would have liked to have seen, and we will work with your staff on getting some of this, but the audit report that came out from 2019 and then the bill that came out from 2019, I would like to have seen some, I know it's only been a year, but that is also part of the reporting put into the new bill. I would have liked to have seen some solid numbers related to that bill. So I'm just putting it out there where I would like to see some of that. The response to you already have responded to the audit. I know that you weren't there when that happened, but now that you are here, I'd like to know a little bit about accountability, a little bit more about the direction you're taking it, so that one gives us more faith and knowing that what you're doing is the right direction. I believe you're doing the right thing. I just want to hear it from you and acknowledge the changes that were made in the legislature in 2019.
No, Delegate, thank you for that. No, I'm not running from it. I wasn't here, but I sit in the chair now, so I own it. I own the responsibility for it, so I don't shy away from it. I have read it. I've read it a lot, read it multiple times. And that's why, frankly, and not trying to maybe not give you a direct answer, but that's why I spent so much time on the core value conversation. And that was purposeful, and I maybe should have been more explicit, that the focus on the core values is frankly a direct result, our direct response to that. Now, there are specific things we need to do. There's certain legislation we need to do. There's certain controls we have to put in place, and we have put those in place. we're not going to be making investments outside of the state of Maryland. That's just not going to happen, period. I will state that, and period. We're just not going to do that. Our goal is to grow, as I said, to grow the Maryland innovation culture, period. And I don't hesitate on that in one way, shape, or form. But again, I'm being repetitive, but the goal is to operate better. And I just believe, Delegate, that if we spend time thinking about how we should operate and invest in people, companies don't grow. You grow because you invest in people. And when you grow the people, then the organization grows. It doesn't happen the other way around. And so I'm very much about rethinking our talent at TEDCO. We've actually put up something where we're investing in professional development of our individuals at TEDCO, making sure they understand their growth trajectory, but also understand their responsibilities as well. So that's a lot of what you're going to hear from me, but that doesn't shy away from the outcomes that you want to hear, which is who are we investing in, what type of firms, and are they growing innovation? Absolutely. But that doesn't happen without the people. That's why I showed you the org chart, because those are the people that's going to make it happen. I'm not going to do it. That's the people in that org chart that's going to make it happen.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you addressing it. Just wanted to make sure that we didn't, go on without bringing back up the fact that there have been some changes, and that I'm sure we're going to see some data related to those changes.
Absolutely, sir.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions from the members? I don't see any.
Appreciate, again, I can't thank you all enough for your support, and we stand ready to serve.
Excellent. Appreciate you taking the time today, and we will all be in touch.
Thanks, sir.
Next, we're going to be moving for an update from the activities of the Maryland Agriculture Resource-Based Industry Development Corporation, MARBIDCO. Mr. Stephen Henry, Executive Director, you are up. That is a mouthful of an acronym, sir.
Yes, and that's why we have an acronym. Otherwise, people wouldn't be able to say the name of my organization. Thank you very much. Again, Steve McHenry, Executive Director of MARBIDCO, and it's a pleasure for me to be here today. I have a few slides. I'm going to race through them pretty rapidly so that you all can finish your meeting on time. So if you'll, and I'm going to ask the person on the other just to advance the slide to the next one, please. Okay, so what is a resource-based business? And again, this is what we think of as our traditional rural industry: agriculture, seafood, forest industry. These are the industries that provide things that we use in our daily lives: food, fiber products, paper products, etc. And these are typically small and family-run businesses that are highly dependent on the weather, on seasonality, on national and international markets, etc. And the other thing I want to say is all of these traditional rural industries are heavily regulated by state and local and federal regulations. So just be aware of that. Okay, moving on, please. Next slide. Even though agri-resource-based business is 6 to 7% of Maryland's economy, as I mentioned, it's important to everybody. We all need to eat 3 times a day, and much of our food comes from Maryland producers. And what we do is more than about just economics. It's about clean air, clean water, and all the other benefits that are derived from our resource-based businesses. One thing you might not know is over half of Maryland's land area today is still privately owned rural working land. And that includes both farm and forest land. Of course, there's a lot of history around agriculture and our seafood industry. And it's important for me to point out that these traditional rural industries underpin the economies on the Eastern Shore and Western Maryland even today, where about 1/3 of all economic activity is associated with resource-based business. Next, please. Okay, so why was MARBIDCO created 13 or 14 years ago? Well, then as now, there's a concern about the aging rural workforce. The average age of the Maryland farmer today is 57 years old. There's been a lot of concern about the loss of agricultural and forest land to development. As you've heard about the need for capital and credit availability in other sectors, this is certainly true in agriculture. And this is where MARBIDCO's focus lies today. And an office often quoted phrase that I hear is the best ag land preservation program is a profitable farm operation, which suggests, of course, that a parent getting ready to retire would like to leave the family farm to the next generation. And the next generation will, some of them will stay on the family farm if indeed the operation is profitable and has a future. Next slide, please. Okay, so what is the eligible business activity for Marbitco? Of course, traditional commodity crops, both for human consumption as well as animal feed, table crops, vegetables, fruits, specialty crops of various sorts, seafood and aquaculture, horticulture, our greenhouse and nursery industry, which we also can help with Maryland's equine industry, and of course, fiber production and processing. In Maryland, we're talking about wood products and wool products to a small extent. Next slide, please. Just to give you a quick snapshot of Maryland agriculture, this is from the 2017 Census of Agriculture that USDA conducts every 5 years. You can see the breakout of Maryland's primary agriculture. And you'll note that the poultry and egg comprise 48% of the primary agriculture in Maryland. And most of that is the broiler industry on Maryland's Eastern Shore. And then you'll see grains and oil seeds are 23%. That's corn, soybeans, and wheat. And then there's other products as well. I will note that 62% of this pie chart, it relates to animal agriculture. So livestock is very important to Maryland agriculture. Next slide, please. And just while we're talking about the pie charts, I thought you should see what kinds of projects that Marbitco has funded over the years by business type. This chart also includes forestry and seafood, which the other pie chart did not include. And you'll see there that, it pretty is representative of the primary production around the state. I will note that Marbitco's investments in vegetable, fruits, and specialty crops is about maybe 3 times what was on the pie chart. So we have a little more focus there and a little less focus on a couple of other areas. Next chart, please. All right, very quickly, Maryland has 12,429 farms, about 2 million acres. We're seeing an increase in female primary farm producers. We have about 3,700 today, about 30% of all farmers are now women, which is very interesting because 10 years ago, that number was 15%. So we've basically doubled the number of women farmers in the state over the last decade or so. And about half of our farmers have farming as their primary occupation, meaning the other half have jobs off the farm as well. And very typically in a farm family, you'll have one member of the family that's the primary farmer, and then you'll have other members of the family in supporting roles. I mentioned the average age of the Maryland farmer is 57 years old. Another statistic here that's very interesting to me, the average age of the beginning farmer in Maryland is 45 years old. Now, USDA defines a beginning farmer as someone with 10 or fewer years of farm management experience. So you're going to have a range of ages there, but we are seeing a lot of mid-career and even early retirement folks getting into farming for the first time. And we're certainly trying to be supportive of that clientele. Next slide, please. And just some focus on the farmland itself. Again, 2 million acres statewide. The farms are getting a little smaller. We're seeing that over time. The average farm size is about 160 acres. I will point out in central and southern Maryland, the farms tend to be a little smaller. And in western Maryland or Eastern Shore, the farms tend to be a little larger. And one slide, one statistic I really wanted to point out to you was that 55% of all of Maryland's farms consist of 50 acres or fewer in size. So that's something that we're very cognizant of, and we've actually developed a special program around helping beginning farmers get on these smaller farm properties. And I'll talk about that in a second. Next slide, please. We worked with Salisbury University in 2018 to have an economic impact analysis conducted on a county by county basis across the state. The Salisbury study found that Maryland resource-based business comprised over $23 billion in economic impact, or about 6.3 of the state's gross domestic product. And of that, the food, feed, and fiber production and processing industries, Marbitco's lane, if you will, comprised just under 20 billion in economic impact. And that does not include some additional impact from horses in the state. We have a number of horses, of course, and many involved in recreational riding and so forth. So that wasn't fully incorporated into their study. Next slide, please. And just to sort of further segment that, about 16 billion is in agriculture, 3.5 billion in forestry, and just under 400 million in seafood. So Maryland's seafood industry is somewhat smaller today than it was, say, a generation ago. Next slide, please. And just to, again, to restate there, you can see the economic impact of Maryland's food and fiber production industries there, $20 billion. Next slide, please. All right, we broke the study down, and I think this might be interesting to you all, by region. And you can see here, as you would expect, that agri-resource-based business is pretty important in Western Maryland and on the Eastern Shore. But this is very significant of the 5 counties in Central Maryland, which includes Baltimore City, Baltimore County, Howard, Harford, and Montgomery counties. There's a tremendous economic impact of food and fiber production and processing in Central Maryland. So I wanted to point this out so you can see the impact here. So there's obviously, food has grown everywhere, even in Baltimore City. But once those products are grown, they have to be processed. So the dairies and the food processors and the wood processors, many of them are located in Central Maryland. So you see those impacts reflected in this particular slide. Next slide, please. All right, so we were created, it actually took the General Assembly 3 years to get us up and running. We were first established by a bill passed in 2004. In 2005, we were given the job of helping to facilitate as an intermediary organization, rural land preservation. And then in 2006, funding was actually provided to Marbitco to get it started. And it's important to note that unlike some of the federal programs, there's no geographic limitation to where Marbitco can fund projects. We can fund projects in every county in Baltimore City, and we certainly have. Next slide, please. This might be useful to you because we've heard about some other small business finance programs today, MSBDFA in particular. Of course, the counties have revolving loan programs. You have the video lottery terminal program, which many of you are aware of. Where does Marbitco fit into the food system continuum? And so in this slide, you can see that on the left-hand side with food and production and processing, it's only Marbitco and USDA providing loans and credit and capital in that space, where on the other side of food distribution, you have other public entities that are there to make loans and provide economic development support at the small business level. So this gives you just a frame of reference. We're working on the left side. The other economic development agencies are working primarily on the right-hand side. Next slide, please. Okay, Marbitco has a board of directors of 17. The agencies that we work most with, MDA, DNR, and Commerce, have a representation, as does the University of Maryland Extension, the Rural Maryland Council, and the Food Center Authority. And the governor appoints 11 other members from various sectors of our resource-based industry world. Next slide, please. The legislature has empowered us to help develop our traditional rural industries and markets. As I mentioned, we are tasked with helping to facilitate rural land preservation efforts. And of course, our main function is to alleviate a shortage of non-traditional capital and credit at affordable rates of interest. So we are a nimble financial intermediary organization that works at the speed of business. We offer 15 programs today. Some are very active. Some we may only do one project every other year end. We're primarily a lender in terms of the volume of dollars that we advance. We have a staff that are very experienced in credit underwriting and loan administration, but we also provide small incentive grants as well, including most recently with the pandemic, and I'll talk about that. And we also help with silo connecting amongst the various public sector agencies. Next slide, please. We partner with a lot of different institutions in the public sector as well as the private sector. You can see the list here. At the top of the list are commercial banks and the 3 farm credit associations that serve the state. Next slide, please. What's unique about Marbitco relative to the other public economic development finance agencies is you all, with respect to our core programs, are capitalizing our operations over a several-year period, after which time we have to be self-sustaining. So we're going to be cut off here after 2025 with respect to our core loan and grant programs, and we are on track to do that. So there was a major piece of legislation that passed in 2006 called the Agricultural Stewardship Act. That legislation provided $4 million a year ending in 2020. The Great Recession came, been some BRFA actions along the way. We're down to 2.735 million ending in 2025 now. And as I say, with that funding, we will be self-sustaining going forward with our core programs. The Ag Stewardship Act also first authorized Marbitco to offer the Next Generation Farmland Acquisition Program with up to $5 million a year. No funding was ever provided until 2018, when a bill that passed in 2016 took some program open space repayment funds to help us launch the Next Generation program, which I'll talk about in a moment. Next slide, please. So in terms of our loan making, what we're doing, we're focusing especially on young and beginning farmers and farmers diversifying their operations, often through what we call value-added processing. You have a dairy, you take the milk, you make it into cheese or ice cream. That's an example of value-added product at the farm scale. And so we provide a lot of support there, again, with a real focus on helping young and beginning farmers. In making loans, we're balancing 2 objectives. We want to make sort of higher risk capital and credit available to these beginning farmers, but we also have to be careful not to give away or lose too much money along the way, because we have to be self-sustaining after 2025. Next slide, please. So where has our money come from since 2007? You can see there 2/3 of our money has come from our core appropriations. That's today is the 2.735 million that we receive. We also, I mentioned the Next Gen program that started in 2018. To date, we've received $8.5 million. We also, because we are a nimble financial intermediary organization, broadly chartered to be of assistance in our mission space, we have received grants from various state and federal agencies to set up revolving loan programs, perhaps on an unsecured, making those loans on an unsecured basis. And so you can see there, we've taken in about $7 million from various state, federal, and regional funders as well. Next slide, please. Totaling 54 million. Next slide, please. And just high-level overview of what we've done to date: 362 loans closed, totaling 52 million, leveraging 160 million in commercial lender capital, helping 244 young beginning farmers, 55% of those with first-time farm purchases. And we work fast. You know, we're not the typical government agency. We pretty much guarantee a 3-week turnaround on a loan that we're going to approve. And our average approval time is just 15 days. So the banks like to work with us, our borrowers like to work with us because we're responsive to their needs. We've also made 321 targeted incentive grants, totaling 4.7 million. 2 million of those were pandemic grants. I'll talk about those in a second. And with those grants, we've helped 142 young beginning farmers. And I mentioned the Next Gen program, which we just started 3 years ago. 23 young and beginning farmers have been helped with their first-time farm purchases. And we're helping to preserve that land, hopefully at the same time. Next slide, please. Okay, here's a broad overview. You saw before that we've taken in about 54 million. We've already expended. 66.5 million in these various programs, which I'll very briefly talk about. And I also note this does not include about $8 million in operating expenses that we've had over the last 13 years. And those expenses have by and large been covered now by our internal operating revenues. So again, another indicator of our success in heading towards self-sustainability. Next slide, please. Again, another look at the regions. It will be no surprise, 72% of Maryland's primary agricultural production is on the Eastern Shore. So you can see there, half of our projects have been on the Eastern Shore, and the rest have been spread around different regions of the state. Next slide, please. So our programming falls into three broad categories. I'll talk about core, loan, and grant programs. When I say core, those programs are funded from our annual appropriation of today, it's $2.735 million. When I talk about specialty lending or specialty grant making, those are loans or grants that are made entirely with grants supplied by other state, federal, and regional agencies. So they're giving us money because we know how to administer grants and loans in the sector of the economy that we serve. And then finally, in the area of rural land preservation, we've done some different things in the past, but today our primary rural land preservation facilitation program is the Next Generation Farmland Acquisition Program. And we've just launched a new small acreage Next Gen program, which is going to be particularly relevant in central and southern Maryland, where I mentioned those smaller farm sizes. That program we think is also going to be well geared to helping socially disadvantaged farmers as well. Next slide, please. So again, on the core loans and grants, we have about $5.5 million available today, which is about double our annual appropriation. And we think that's the amount we'll have available going forward. Next slide, please. You can see there the various programs that we offer. Some are very tailored to, say, forestry or Maryland vineyard or hop or tree fruit planting. Next slide, please. Our workhorse program, however, is a program we affectionately call the Mr. Biff program. We've made 207 loans totaling over $46 million since we started offering it in FY 2008. It's a low interest loan program. We've lowered our interest rates because of the pandemic to 2.25% in that program. And we fund not only real estate purchases with that program, but also facilities and capital equipment as well. And we always are partnering with a commercial bank or sometimes the USDA Farm Service Agency in making those loans. And we are nearly always a subordinate lien holder on the collateral, which the banks love because we're helping to take the lion's share of the credit risk. Next slide, please. And then, of course, we have some small grant incentive programs. We work with the local economic development offices to help them do some things that they want to do locally. We have two value-added producer grant programs, one that leverages terrific USDA dollars, and we really are encouraging our Maryland farmers to try to access some of that USDA money, very competitive grant program nationally. And then we also have a grant incentive program we've partnered with Farm Credit on to help urban farmers get loans. So those are our core grant incentive programs. Next slide, please. And we have some specialty lending and grant incentive programs, again, funded by other agencies. We have played a major role in helping to stand up an oyster farming industry in the state, oyster aquaculture, shellfish aquaculture. We've funded a little over $5 million in projects over the last dozen years or so. Again, that money originated from DNR and the federal government. Next slide, please. And you can see there a list of the programs. We also have a small energy efficiency improvement loan that MEA funded, and we've worked with our partners in Southern Maryland with the Southern Maryland Ag Development Commission, SMATIC, on helping them set up a revolving loan program. Next slide, please. And we have two specialty grants, one sponsored by SMATIC and the other in the Upper Shore region. Helps farmers there have their applications to Marbidco for loans, helps improve the credit quality of those applications. Next slide, please. Just some performance stats so you all know how we're doing. As I mentioned, we've made $55 million in loans, 362 loans to be exact. Some 124 of them have already paid back fully. So 34% of all loans we've ever made have already paid back fully. We have 231 open accounts right now, just about $30 million. This is a good number for us. How many loan foreclosures have you had? How many bad loans have you made? Well, we've made just 7 bad loans, about a little under 2% of all loans we've made, and we've lost just 1.4% of the principal that we lent for those loans. And so we're well under where you want to be for a small business revolving loan fund. Next slide, please. And I mentioned rural land preservation facilitation. Again, that's the Next Gen program today. Funding for that program continues through FY 2022 at $2.5 million. And we think we're going to need that level of funding running to about FY 2030. Next slide, please. The Next Gen program, as I mentioned, is focused on beginner farmers, which is defined as 10 or fewer years of farm management experience. We buy an option to buy the permanent conservation easement. We don't buy the conservation easement outright. We don't hold permanent easements at Marbitco. That's the job of MALP, Rural Legacy, private land trust, county land preservation programs. And we bring about half the value of the farm property to the table and give that beginning farmer a period of 4 to 7 years to sell the permanent conservation easement. We hope that happens because we get repaid and that money revolves in the program. Next slide, please. And here's a summary of the results over the last 3.5 years. You can see how we're doing there. Next slide, please. And we've just launched the new small acreage program, which I was referencing. With the traditional Next Gen program, it's targeted to properties meeting the Maryland Ag Land Preservation Foundation's minimum criteria, which is typically 50 acres in size, unless the property is contiguous to a preserved property. So this new small acreage program is going to help us help beginning farmers trying to buy those smaller farm properties, which are suitable for preservation and permanent agricultural activity. So farms between 10 and 49 acres in size. And we're going to bring between 40 and 6% of the fair market value right to the settlement table when the land is transferring to the new farm owner. And we're going to basically buy the easement outright, and we're going to hand it to a local land trust, a county program, or the Maryland Environmental Trust to administer. And I want to thank especially the Southern Maryland delegation because they secured $1 million in funding for this program in the state's capital budget last session. So thank you very much, Delegate Proctor, for your support and delegation support of that. We're going to match that with $1 million of our money, and we're taking it statewide. We just launched the program last month, and Calvert County is actually bringing us the first project here this week. Next slide, please. The pandemic. Like many businesses, our rural businesses were particularly affected as well. Agriculture had generally been a funk for the last 2 or 3 years, many sectors. Of course, some sectors are up when others are down, but pandemic was challenging for many of our farmers that were supplying restaurants and institutions. You can see here a list of the impacts. I'm not going to go through these line by line. Next slide, please. And here's a whole nother laundry list of challenges, including with our local livestock producers, which has actually been kind of a good thing. The demand for, with the breakdown of some of the national supply chains, been a great interest in not only local vegetables and fruits, but also local meats. And so the local meat processors have been very busy, and this has provided some opportunity for our small livestock farmers in the state. Next slide, please. So what has Marbitco done to be helpful during the pandemic? We've deferred loan repayments on about 27 loans, which is about 12% of our portfolio. We've reduced interest rates in our core loan programs by 100 basis points. And we were able to get some CARES Act funding to help launch 2 programs. Next slide, please. So using Marbitco resources, this was before the CARES Act money became available. We just thought we had to do something. So we offered small loans for folks that were really suffering from the pandemic, but also wanted to make adjustments to help make them viable going forward. So we launched that program, and then the CARES Act money became available, about $2 million. And so we stood up a larger program where we could fund up to 80% of an eligible project cost. Again, the applicant had to demonstrate they were impacted by the pandemic, and they had to show they were going to make adjustments to the operation to allow them to remain viable going forward. So this was like immediate, this summer kinds of equipment purchases, et cetera. Next slide, please. And you can see here what we did. We had 44 applications in our loan program. We funded 32 of them. Not a huge amount of money, $255,000. But we are providing a 10% grant or rebate with those loans, which is being funded from the CARES Act. And then we received 100 applications for our pandemic adjustment grants. We've approved 96 of them, and 92 grants were actually dispersed, just under $2 million. And the average award was about $21,500. A good many young beginning farmers were assisted, as were a lot of farmers that were buying cold storage equipment. Next slide, please. And here's a listing of where those projects were by county. You'll see they're spread around the state pretty well. Again, Central Maryland did very well with these pandemic adjustment grants and loans. Next slide, please. And just in terms of the business type, what kinds of farm operations were being assisted? Well, a good many oyster farmers were helped. They were really hurt by the loss of the restaurant trade. And also a lot of vegetable and table crop producers were assisted, many of them with refrigeration to allow them to store product, because many of them were adjusting to brand new markets for the first time. Next slide, please. So here's how we've done over the last 5 years. Well over half of our projects have been funded over the last 5 years. Gives you just a sense of the magnitude of what we've been doing. Next slide, please. And finally, I want to end with some comments about demographics. I know this committee is very interested in how we're serving various customers. On gender, as I mentioned, from the last census of ag, we've gone from 19 to 30% female operators. And Marbitco's projects have funded 36% of applicants who were female. With veterans, I know this is near and dear to one of the co-chairs' hearts. 11% of Maryland farmers are veterans, and 13% of our successful applicants have been veterans. And we also offer an interest rate reduction for all of our loan programs. We call that the Hometown Hero Interest Rate Reduction Program. Next slide, please. And in terms of how Maryland fares with minority farmers, we have a small number of minority farmers. It's been that way for many years. As of the last census of agriculture, it was 3.6% were minorities. The census before that in 2012 was 2.71%. It was about the same amount in 2007. But you'll note that Marbitco is funding minority farmers based on surveys that we conduct, much like Commerce does. We can't require that our applicants fill out the survey, but we do try to get it back from them, and we're pleased that 54% have responded. You can see there that we're funding minority farmers at 3 times the rate that they are in the population in general. So we think that's an encouraging story to tell. Next slide, please. So in summary, just looking ahead and where we're headed, I mean, I think there's going to be an increased demand and increased interest in locally produced food. That's been a trend for a while. It's going to keep growing. I mentioned the situation with livestock production. Our smaller producers particularly are going to have some increased access to market. There's certainly a growing interest in urban agriculture. We're seeing a little bit of increase in rural land development right now. Since the Great Recession, it had been pretty stable at a fairly modest level, but starting a couple of years ago, and certainly accelerated by the pandemic, the demand for housing in rural areas has gone up. And in prices, home prices in rural areas since this past summer have gone up 10 to 20%. So I don't know what that's going to continue to be the story, but it's certainly the story right now. And I haven't talked at all about this, but we have a really struggling forest products industry right now. A lot going on there. a big report that's been funded by the federal government, Commerce, DNR, and Marbitco, and others. It's going to come out in December. So you'll be seeing recommendations, I suspect, around that. So closing comment, Marbitco is on track with our core loan programs and with funding ending in 2025. And then our next gen program is going to need to be funded through 2030, we believe. So that concludes my remarks, Mr. Chairman. Sorry for the number of slides, but I thought you might appreciate knowing some of that information. Delighted to answer any questions you have.
Well, thank you, Mr. McHenry. I think that I know I learned an awful lot in listening to this proposal. I'm sorry, this presentation. So thank you so much for that. Delegate Proctor, did you raise your hand?
I did. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. McHenry. I heard your focus on young and beginning farmers, and I realize that's probably your core mission. But nationwide, we hear about so many farms that are going into default. And I'm wondering if there is any way that you can be of assistance to existing farms that are having financial difficulties.
Yes, and I will say that, that's been a concern. And in terms of, disaster and emergency assistance, that's a responsibility of the federal government and USDA. But in terms of helping young people or folks that grew up on the farm, want to come back to the family farm, if they can, they've got to see an economic future from that farming operation to want to return. So that's why we put such a focus on helping young beginning farmers get access to land, because land tenure is a big issue. There's a lot of people coming into farming today that didn't grow up in farming, right? They're first generation farmers, and they need access to land. So we've got, as you've heard, not only loan programs targeted directly to that, but now these two next generation farmland acquisition programs that are really targeted to land tenure. So when those farms are transferring, right, existing farm, hopefully it's not going into development, hopefully it's going to another farmer. That's where the Marbitco impact has been especially large. And so I don't know if I've directly answered your question. If you're a sinking ship, it's hard to get a loan, right? So, a bank's not going to make a loan to a sinking ship. It's hard for Marbitco to finance a project that's not, viable. I will tell you, it's been worrisome. We've lost half of the state's dairy in the last dozen years or so. We're down to 344 dairies. And, a lot of that has to do with national market demand for milk. People aren't drinking as much milk. And there's not a whole lot we can do about that. But anyway, I hope I at least partially answered your question.
Did. Thank you. One more question. How small is small acre?
Well, for the next gen program, we've set the minimum size at 10 acres. You can have an intensively farmed operation of between 5 and 10 acres that can be economically viable. So we sort of set 10 as the minimum for the moment. And for USDA purposes, for the census, you only have to have $1,000 of commercial farm sales to be included in the census. So we have a lot of smaller, farm operations, part-time. And if they're selling food commercially, we want to help them if we can.
Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Colleagues, do we have any other questions for Mr. McHenry? Okay. How about you, Chair Young?
I don't have a question. I learned a lot from the presentation, and I appreciate you bringing up the numbers related to veteran farmers. Actually, I'd like to catch up with you after the presentation because there's some other questions, but it's not related to anything we need to talk about here at the joint hearing. So
I'll be happy to speak with you. Thank you.
Excellent.
All right, fantastic. So thank you, Mr. McHenry, for that. And, for all the presenters today, and also to my colleagues on this joint committee who have hung in there for this 2 hours and 15 minutes. I think it's been a very good conversation. There's been a lot that we've learned. I know that I've learned, and I think there's some follow-up to be done, particularly looking at some of the return on investment on these different pathways that we have set forward. Delegate Young also talked about some of the accountability, which we know we have to look at more closely. Thank you so much for bringing that up, particularly for these quasi entities, including the one that we just heard from. I think that's very important. We know that there's been some challenges with that and other parts and other quasi entities. And so I think that really makes a lot of sense for us to hear from that. I'm sure Chair Young, do you have some closing remarks, or do any of our colleagues have any closing remarks that they would like to make?
Yeah, I appreciate it, Senator. I just want to reiterate from the very beginning too that with the economic impacts of the COVID-19 crisis, we're getting ready for this session and thinking about, one, accountability, how we spend public funds, and how we're going to be budgeting. So these discussions are more important than ever. So thank you for your leadership and your partnership on this. Also, I just want to make sure to thank the committee staff. We don't engage with you all that much. We don't meet as often as normal committees, but I believe Caleb Weiss and Heather McDonough, thank you for organizing and keeping us all on track to get these meetings together. So if anyone has any follow-on questions outside of this, feel free to reach out to the office from the House members. Looking forward to working with everybody during the session.
Thank you, Chair Young. This joint committee will meet again actually next week on the 21st at 1 p.m. to hear from the Comptroller, the Treasurer, and the Office of Legislative Audits. And with that, I would say that we are adjourned. So thank you, everyone.